All right, guys. So basically in this chapter, we're going to be focusing on designing a project mockup for a fictional company with a very generic but very well-designed landing page. And so right here, we have a web design grid document that I want you to open up from the project files. Just go ahead and download that wherever you're viewing this at. I'll make it easy for you to find those project files. And if you're unfamiliar with what a grid system is, well, basically we have 12 different columns here. And the purpose that we'll say just at this point in the course is that this is going to help us structure our layout into different columns. So depending on what modern CSS framework you're going to be working with, whether that be Bootstrap or Foundation or Bulma, which is what we're going to be using, they're all based on at least 12 column grid systems, and they're responsive. It makes your layout essentially adapt to different viewports or different devices like tablets, desktops, and mobile phones. All right, so basically we want to click on and toggle on and off the layers here, and you'll see we have our artboard. This is the Web 1920, so by default we're going to start designing the site based on a large viewport like a desktop. And if we come into here, we'll see we have a grid layer, and we will be toggling this on and off as we go. All right, so for now I'm going to leave it on, and we're going to focus on doing a sort of like a nav bar at the top. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to be using Bulma CSS, and this is a modern front-end responsive framework. And let me show you the site real quickly. And you can access it at bulma.io. Let me just drag this up slightly. And we'll be referring to the documentation quite a bit as we're designing our prototype. The reason being, we're going to be using some of these predefined elements that the Bulma framework offers. So you can see it's organized in different tabs and also different sub-tabs. So we have an overview over here of how to install, and we'll go over this later on in the course after we get done with the prototypes. We have, just a really well documented outline of this framework going on here. So like I said, we want to start with a nav bar. And so if we go over to components, we'll see we have a nav right here. And it's basically a responsive horizontal nav bar that can contain links, tabs, buttons, icons, and a logo. All right, so it tells you just information about how to structure it, and we're going to go over this later on in the course once we get to that point. But for now, all we're going to look at is just the design, and the example is right here at the top. So this is the nav bar. And of course, we can customize this based on our needs, and we will. But all you have to just really know is just how it's structured, kind of what the buttons look like. We are going to have a button for ours, and also the links and how they're structured. Now, of course, we can also customize it with our own CSS later on. So we'll just think of that going forward. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a nav bar. So what we'll do, and by the way, I will try to remember as much as possible, like when I zoom up, for instance, or do certain things with my mouse and keyboard, I'll try to remember to let you know what I did. For instance, right there, to zoom in and out, we hold Alt in the mouse scroll wheel. Also, to pan or move things around, we hold the space bar and left click and drag. Okay, so for our nav bar, we're going to have it extend initially 100% of the viewport width. So in this context, we don't have to really worry about the grid at all. All right, so we're just going to take a rectangle here, left click, drag it out. I'm not too concerned at this point with the height or anything like that. We just want to get a general idea. All right, so when we let go, we don't need a border on this. We do want to fill, and I'm going to give it a specific color code. And the fill, the color code is 383838. And this is basically, if you hit enter, not quite a black, not a medium gray, just kind of in between. I'm not too much of a fan of absolute black these days for this, for like a nav bar, for instance. There's some obviously contexts in which it would work well. All right, so now we'll go ahead and put in a logo. So we'll take the type tool and just left click somewhere. And I'm just going to type in my company. Of course, it's real small. We can't really see it. So I'm going to zoom up with an Alt scroll wheel. And real quickly over here, we can see we have the text panel options, and this is the size. Just a side note, you can left click and drag up or down to change the size. So we'll say somewhere around 33 will be fine. And we'll make it white here for the fill. All right, right around there is good. All right, and then we're gonna have a right aligned horizontal navigation over here. All right, so we're gonna have 4 different links and then also a call to action button over here. So I'll left click, we'll start right around here, and I'll just type in home. All right, I'm gonna make this larger. Right around 27 will work. And there's not enough contrast, so let's change the fill here. Bring it up. Right around, the color code is BF, 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 like your boyfriend. Or not. Okay, so Control C and then Control V. We'll move this over, holding Shift. Right now, the width it's not really important at this point. We'll get that figured out in a second once we get them all there. We're gonna have about, and then Control C, Control V. See, when we move it over, we can see that those little guides showed up. Right there is even spacing. We'll change this to features. You can, by the way, hit Escape just to select the Move tool. Control C, Control F. And then also a fact page. We are going to make the fact page function, by the way, when we get to the development process for each of our 3 different JavaScript technologies, React, Angular, and Vue. All right, so that looks pretty good for now. I may want to decrease the size, maybe just to 25. All right. Now, we'll go ahead and create a call to action button. Now, this is a good point to go back and look at the Balma documentation. And we can see some examples of a button here. But if we go to Elements Button, just going to give you examples and the coding examples associated with their buttons and how they have them styled by default. Now notice we also have outlined versions, and I think that's what I want to use just for one button in the navigation. All right, so let's go back and let's go ahead and use our rectangle once again. I'm just going to left click and drag out. Somewhere right around there will work. All right, we're going to get rid of the fill and we're going to give it a specific color code. All right, so I just pasted in color code of 1EC9AC. And if you click this right here, it's going to add it to our swatches so that we can reuse it easily later on. All right, so now if you also notice, if we go back to our documentation, there is a slight bevel or rounded corner on the button. So let's go ahead and emulate that as well. We can just drag up right here, roughly to around 5. And that looks good. All right. By the way, we want to space this out evenly. So I'm going to take all of these 4 while holding the Shift. And then hold Shift and left click and drag right around there. So we have equal space between each of these elements. So that creates consistency, which is obviously very important whenever you're dealing with UI design. All right, so what I want to do now is put in some text. So we take the type tool. If we want this to be centered, we can just left click and drag all the way from the left to the very right. Then over here, we click on center, and that's how you absolutely center text here in Adobe XD, as well as other graphics applications, pretty standard. So this is going to be just a join now text right here, join now button. And as well, we're going to make the text the same color. So we click over here, and there we go. All right, awesome. One final thing. If we go back to the Balma documentation, go back to nav, we can see that if we come down, there's some other examples that we have here. You can actually add a class that has a shadow, and there's a shadow that will show up if you add this class. So the shadow is very subtle. So let's just add a shadow. Of course, it's not necessary, but I'm choosing to add it. So just add a shadow just like that, and we'll see what the direction is. So it's just going straight down by 3 pixels, which is pretty consistent. I don't know if you could see it, but it's just barely there. Okay, so that is it for this section. In the next, we're going to go ahead and get focused on the hero section down here.